So thank you for joining us again, and welcome to another Power Series for Knowledge is Power Foundation. Today's Power Series is in line with our financial literacy theme, and today we are pleased, overjoyed to have with us Ashley Wilson. Welcome, Ashley.
Hi, Daryl. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me to join you in this discussion. It's very important and relevant. Especially with young people and they're starting their financial journeys, it's very important that they know their options for funding their post-secondary education. So I'm very excited for our conversation.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. And this is one of the things the foundation really believes in. School systems, and this is not a knock on the school system, but they will teach you a lot of things and algorithms and things to do with fractions and pi and square roots, but they don't actually teach young people how to handle and manage and deal with money. So we're glad that you're here today to be with us and to share. So why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of your background and why you want to be involved with KIP?
For sure. You really hit it on the hand. Like you hit the nail on the head with that statement, because schools teach you a lot of things, but financial literacy is something that is often overlooked, and not necessarily intentionally. I think in general, it's a tough conversation to have, especially because everyone has different financial situations. You know, it's hard to teach young people how to handle your finances if you're not confident yourself, right? So I think it is a topic that we skirt around a bit, but it's incredibly important. I learned that the hard way myself. As a student, I didn't have that kind of guidance, and there's a lot of pitfalls and things that we can have advice on so you can avoid them. Myself, with a bit of my background, both my parents, they were immigrants to the country when they were at school age. So, it's very hard to teach your children about finances when you're also learning at the same time, right? And I think that's where the importance comes from schooling, is to have that discussion, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I think if we gave everyone the tools that they need at a young age, we'd have more success. And I think it's one of the reasons why we're seeing young people live at home a lot longer, right? Because we're struggling to manage our finances and figure things out. And the economy's changed a lot. So I think we need a bit more emphasis on it. I think it's really great that you're starting the discussion there. In terms of my background professionally, I've worked in the financial services industry for over 7 years. Currently, I'm an associate trust officer at a bank. Previously, I was a financial advisor. So I've worked a lot with clients in terms of their financial goals and really seeing where they're at and how they can accomplish them. And I've seen a lot. One of the biggest hurdles is the lack of knowledge, right? You are more apprehensive to make a financial decision if you don't know if you're making an informed one. So I think that, again, it always comes back down to knowledge and your comfort level.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that background. And again, thank you for being involved in this power session. So today's theme is around saving and credit, but let's start with saving, specifically saving for education, but really it could apply to saving for all sorts of things. Is that right?
Definitely. So first and foremost, for your audience that are of the age to go to post-secondary school, it's a very large decision that you're making. It impacts your future, right? And one thing I would say is that you're making the right choice because you're investing in yourself, right? So it's very important that you get as much knowledge as you can in the early stages so that you are well prepared and that you don't end up suffering later on, right? So what I would say is if you're at the age where you're thinking about going to post-secondary, there's multiple ways to fund your education. So there's 5 main ways that we would say. So one would be like your savings. So that could be savings in the form of an RESP, Registered Education Savings Plan, that your parent would have maybe set up for you, or savings that you have in your bank account that went towards school. The other thing that we would say to fund your education would be through scholarships, bursaries, and grants. So scholarships are kind of merit-based on your academic performance. Grants and bursaries are awarded to you based on your need, right? You really have to take a look because there's a lot of resources available just looking at the different charities, right? And then we also have government loans to help you fund your education. That's an option. And then you have, you can also get educational lines of credits through the banks. With that, you'd have a parent as a guarantor, so they're assigned with you so that they can lend you the money, so that there's someone else to assist in the event that there's any issues with paying it back. The fifth option would be working while studying, and that's a bit tricky because you have to find a balance. Again, going back to my personal experience in learning, is you don't want to overwork. One of the things is that if you ever do get extra funding or grants, they try to give you money so that you don't have to work so much because you need to be able to focus and study. And going back to that, I would say, especially if you're of age to go to school, sometimes you get caught up with work because it's tangible. You're getting money in your pocket. But focusing on your studies is very important because you can get those scholarships so that you don't need to borrow so much, right? So I wish that was something someone kind of emphasized the importance of that to me, because I did well in school. I could coast through school, and I felt like, well, I'm going to work and making money. It's something that I have in my hand. What I didn't realize, though, is that if you get scholarships, it's a lot less money that you need in the future. So I think that we really need to prioritize things like that.
Absolutely. And so you hear horror stories surrounding student loans after you're done your education, and that would help eliminate that problem. But can you talk to us quickly about student loans and what kind of interests are you looking at?
So with student loans, one thing I would say is there's no shame in having to borrow for your education, because like I said, it's an investment in you and your future, right? So I think that the stigma with that, it's a bit tough, but it's necessary, right? If that's what you need to do to pursue your education, that's what you need to do. In terms of the interest, you could be looking at about 5% interest, right? But they're depending on how you're borrowing. I mean, statistically they say within 3 years of graduation, a lot of undergraduates pay back their loans, right? Um, so as long as you're making your steady payments and you're committed to it, I mean, it's a good vehicle to help you get to your goal, right? What I would say is that, and it can be very stressful having a government loan, right? They're not designed to be paid off within 1 year. You know, the government understands that you're going to be a new working professional, and you're going to be paying it back over time, right? So if you like, as long as you have a good financial plan, you're getting coached and you're committed to it, you shouldn't be fearful to borrow. You just have to be very disciplined.
Okay. And so for students out there who may have more questions, so you named five examples of how to cover or help pay for your post-education. Um, if KIP followers out there have more questions, you recommend them going and speaking to their banks. If they are with a bank, like what would you recommend?
So my recommendation would be definitely source out all your options. When you're in high school, I think it's great to have a good relationship with your bank. Find the bank that's best suited for you, your needs, do some research. Banks have great programs for students, right? So when you're going to open up a bank account, ask these questions, you know, say like, what's the best for me? Because one thing with financial advisors is that we do holistic planning, right? We want to make sure that we're covering all the bases for the whole family. So if education is something that is a goal for the family, we'll take a look into that. We'll say, what are the savings that are available? If for some reason, because not everyone is eligible for government loans just because of the family situation. So you could have two parents who are earning a high income, but they might not be able to fund their child's education. So it's kind of like a gray area, right? So when you find yourself in that situation, then you come to the bank and you ask for some options. Because like I said, we have educational lines of credit. So and I would suggest having that conversation with the parent, right? Going to the bank and finding out what your options are, right? Because if we do an educational line of credit, it expands over the course of your education while you're in school, and then it converts into either a regular line of credit or a loan when you're done, so you can pay it back. So there's flexibility. You just have to work with your bank, right? And what I would say is having a good relationship with your bank early it ends up being very beneficial for you, because if you have a good relationship with your bank, you have your bank accounts, if you end up on that credit journey like we'll talk about later on, they have a relationship with you. It makes it a lot easier when you have to borrow for milestones, let's say like buying a house, because the bank knows you, right? And you have that relationship, you're able to see your history. So I would just say, don't be uncomfortable to go into the bank. I know that everything's digital these days, but like making sure you have a bank that you do a lot of your bank, like most of your banking with, not going everywhere, it makes a big difference because then everything's consolidated. They can get a real snapshot for you.
Awesome. And I want to get into the credit, as you mentioned there, but I've heard of the 50-30-20 rule.
Yeah,
Can you on that for us?
for sure. So what that really comes down to is if you're earning an income, right? So what you want to make sure you're doing is when you get your paycheck is allocating it properly. And that also comes down to budgeting as well, which we can talk about a bit about. But the 50-30 rule really comes down to you want to have 50% of your income going towards your essential needs. So that's going to be your housing, your food, any subscriptions that you have, like that's the main thing. So making sure that your transport, food, and housing are covered by 50%. Then you're going to want to have 20% saved. We always have a rule of paying yourself first. So making sure that when you're getting paid, you're automatically putting a little bit away, something that you won't miss. And then 30% would be for entertainment. So that's if you're going out to the gym and going out to the movies or things like that. Like you want to have a bit of money to play with for sure. But the key is making sure that you're saving.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned credit and some pitfalls or issues that people get into. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So as a student, it's a very exciting time because, like I said, banks really like to work with you. And that might sound a bit weird or backwards, but the reason why is because we want to make sure that you have really good habits up front so that you don't develop bad habits in the future. What I mean by that is we want to make sure, like I said, that you have the relationship with your bank. Like you can have a student credit card, right? With your parent, if you're comfortable. I know some people are credit adverse; they don't really want to have credit, but it's important because your education helps you to increase your earning potential. But your credit score, which is incredibly important, helps determine your lending capacity, right? If lenders are going to be willing to give you a mortgage or loans or things like that. So starting at a young age to develop a healthy credit score is very important. With credit cards, usually for students, you would have a limit of $500 or $1,000. You want to make sure that you're making your payments regularly. If you use your card, you want to pay it off within your statement period, or you absolutely must be making your minimum payments on time. It sounds silly, but if you miss your statement date or your due date, it actually affects your credit score. And that is actually the pitfall that we see a lot when we're doing lending applications is late payments. They really hit your credit score. And a lot of young people, they're kind of passive about it, right? Like I'll make a payment here or there, whatever, but it actually has a really big impact when you need the credit. The other thing is that some decisions you make will affect your credit score for 7 years. So you might be thinking, oh, it's okay, it's not a big deal now, I'll improve my credit score later on. But then when you do an application for a car loan and the lender goes to look at your credit score, they're going to see, oh, well, Jimmy Smith didn't make payments on his card 9 times. And it's like, can we trust Jimmy with further lending? So those are things that people kind of don't really know, but it actually has a really big impact on you. The other thing too is if you have a credit card is don't go over the limit, right? That's going to also negatively impact you. And we also say as a rule of thumb, you don't really want to go over 50% of your available limit. The reason why we advise against that is because it looks like you can't handle the credit you've been given. So you really want to be on top of it, making sure that you, like I said, those regular payments are very important. A tip that I would say is set a reminder on your phone. That's what I used to do. I'd be like, okay, my payment's coming up. I gotta make sure I make my payment. My cell phone bills, things like that. Like I just set reminders because you don't want to have late payments. Because the other thing too is when you have applications, people don't get to see who you are. You're looking at a whole bunch of numbers.
Absolutely. And so if people have made the mistake, if they didn't have this knowledge prior, and so for example, now they are sitting with a credit card that's nearly maxed out, or they're having a low credit score, do you have any suggestions, recommendations? How would somebody correct the situation they may be in right now?
Okay, so for sure, that happens a lot, more common than people actually imagine because no one talks about it, right? So what I would suggest is really being disciplined and making your payments on time, doing more than a minimum payment, getting yourself into that habit. It's very important. Don't have multiple credit cards outstanding, right? Just focus on using like one, paying it down, being disciplined in that regard. The other thing is just making sure you're not having unnecessary credit and being disciplined with your payments. Those are the main tips that I would have. If you're someone who wants a credit card because there's certain things where you need a credit card, but you're not comfortable with lending, right? You can actually have a secured credit card. That's an option as well. And that's also what I suggest for clients who are rebuilding their credit sometimes, is that if they had to close their credit card for some reason or they had an issue in the past, we would do a secured credit card. That way they can prove that they can handle the credit and rebuild it back. That's an option as well.
Absolutely. And this is all such valuable information. And there's no way that we squeeze all that we need to hear into a power session. So we hope to have you back to discuss more. But before we let you go, any last words of advice? I know we've been focusing on school age individuals today. Any last words of advice? Anything that you're seeing in the industry that would help our KIP followers?
Yeah, so one thing I would suggest as well, that's really important when you're going to school, is looking for bargains, right? School's very expensive. It's one of the, next to a house, it's the most expensive thing you'll pay for sometimes, right? So what I would say is look for bargains, buy your books secondhand, right? You don't need to get the first edition because you could be saving, instead of paying $200, you could be paying $50, right? And then take advantage of the benefits that you have at school. So there's student pricing clubs, things like that. Like anything that gives you a discount, go for it. Take advantage of the student banking offers from the banks. And you don't have to pay transaction fees, right? Things like that. Like anything that could help you save money, go. I would say embrace it, especially if you're paying for it. Part of your student fees sometimes include health and dental. Make sure you're taking advantage of that. And the other thing I would say is that I know statistically for women and men of color or who have parents who are immigrants, right? Like there's a real desire for post-secondary education, but sometimes you just don't know how to get there. So I would say just make sure you ask a lot of questions. If there's anyone in a career that you find inspiring, ask them how they got there, right? And then say, how did you, like, what were your options? How did you fund that? Ask questions, because people aren't afraid to give advice, right? It's just that no one asks. So I would say just making sure that you're exhausting all your options, you really know what the path is, it'll make a difference. And like I said, don't be afraid to borrow, right? Like if that's what you need to do to get to your goal, for sure. But saving is also very important, right? But I just don't want people to think that, oh my gosh, I can't go to school because I have no money, right? That holds you back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashley. We hope to have you back. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions coming in that will be directed to you. If you do have any questions, please email info@kipfoundation.ca and just make reference that it's for the financial literacy series with Ashley, and we'll get those questions to Ashley and we'll get responses for you. But there is so much information to pack in. We really are grateful and appreciative of your time today. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.